Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 132. I'm delighted today to be joined by Northern Ireland and Charlton Athletic striker Conor Washington. Conor, thanks for coming on, mate.
Hi, mate. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good, thank you. I wanted to get, I've just been saying to you before we started recording, I wanted to get a player on, a current player, because we have had some ex-players on the podcast before, but wanted to get a player on for a while. But someone that has got an interest in S&C, sports science, and you're the man for the job. So you're representing all players here, mate.
I'll do as well as I can, but I can't promise anything.
Well, first of all, I think I saw today that there might be a Player of the Month prize snapped up recently. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, I had a good month in March. Yeah, it was good. Disappointed to have finished with a little injury, but in terms of getting up to speed, and I was feeling really good. So hopefully get myself back fit and pick up where I left off.
Yeah, class, and congrats on that, mate. Do you want to take us back, Conor? Because at the start of the podcast, we always go through careers, and obviously we're normally talking sports scientists, S&C coaches, so they'll talk about different roles they've had. But it'd be really interesting to just go through your career in terms of the clubs you've been at so far, and then we'll also go into current day and what you're in terms of your studying and stuff.
Yeah. So I didn't start playing until late. I was never in an academy or never in any youth setup. I was just playing with my mates on a Sunday morning, really. And then I was tiny at the time as well. So I got to about 16, had a bit of a growth spurt, and was playing under 18s football for St Ives Town. And I was just doing really well. So got called up to the first team when I was 16, just turned 17, played there, did really well for a couple of years, and then got a big opportunity to go and play at Newport at the time. He was in the conference. That was a big step up, like five levels that was. And it was really tough. Found that really difficult, but ended up finding my feet in the second season in League Two. Scored some goals before the January, and then got a move to Peterborough, where I think I was there 18 months, 2 years. It was nice to be back near home. That was a good move for me, and at the time it was a real good club to play for. It still is as a striker. To be fair, they churn out strikers all the time. So had a real good run there. Got a move to QPR, and it just never quite worked out there for sort of multitude of reasons, really. But I still enjoyed my time there. I learned a hell of a lot about myself, about the game, and everything like that. So, and then I went to Sheffield, and that was probably the best year in terms of an experience. It was disappointing not to play more of a part, to be honest. But like I said about QPR, the things you learn and what it takes to be part of a successful unit like that was just mind blowing. And it was great to see, obviously, what they did last year. Just disappointing this year, but yeah, real good year that. And then went up to Hearts in Scotland after my contract ran out there, and it was just a bad year. Like, I got so many silly little injuries and ended up having a bit of a freak hamstring where I tore the tendon. So that was 4 months, and then came back from that and played about 3 games, and lockdown, COVID. So that was really disappointing. It was such a great club to play for, and it was to go from the high of Sheffield United getting promoted and then to be in a relegation scrap with Hearts, we were tipped to be sort of in the European spots, was just so demoralising. But so decided that it would be best to sort of get back down to England and move my family back down south, and now I'm at Charlton. So
class. And the sort of COVID topic could be a whole different podcast in itself on like dealing with all the challenges with that, but we'll leave that where it is. We'll try and forget about that period. But one of the big reasons for obviously getting you on, as well as the fact of how experienced you are and all the clubs that you've been at, and the sort of exposure you've had of different coaches, is your interest and knowledge of S&C and sports science as well. So where are you up to with, because I know you're going through some studying on that side of things at the moment. So where are you up to with that?
So I've always loved the gym. I genuinely have since I was 15, 16. And like I was saying, I didn't play until I was 20. So 16 to 20 was do as many bicep curls and bench as much as you could, basically, with no lower body emphasis whatsoever. So, so I did my level 2 halfway through my level 3 PT, and then about 18 months ago, I started a sports science degree. I just wanted to get a deeper understanding, and it's something I've always been interested in. So it was just a good opportunity to do that through the PFA, and I'm in my second year now, halfway through. So yeah, it's been really good, and I've just been enjoying researching stuff. To be fair, I'm never off my phone on Twitter looking at some journal or trying to find the next secret. So
Class. And I was going to say, from your experience of working at different clubs and all the different players that you've been in dressing rooms with, what would you say the sort of general attitude or approach is to sort of sports science and S&C? I know that's hard to say because there's a lot of players involved, but generally, what would you say in terms of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to tar all the players with the same brush, but I would say it's a very, very high percentage, probably over 75% have got little to no interest, I would say, in the sort of day-to-day gym stuff and how they can improve physically and even just their application to the sessions that were put on. 99% of the strength and conditioning coaches or sports scientists I know spend most of their time rounding players up to go to the gym session, never mind actually doing the gym sessions. So yeah, I think we spoke briefly about at the start, it's just the culture of football, and it's not quite ingrained yet. And I genuinely thought it might change around sort of Cristiano Ronaldo, around that sort of era, because obviously he's a big advocate of it, and you look at the success he's had and the transformation he went through as a player. I thought that'll be the catalyst to more players applying themselves, but at the moment it's just not quite worked out.
You don't feel like there has been a step in that sort of direction just of yet?
No, I wouldn't say so. Not in the career, not in the space of time that I've been playing anyway. I would say that it's tough because I would say Sheffield probably had the biggest buy-in. Now, I guess you're talking about correlation versus causality there, really. Like, was it the group in general, and that they just had that many players that wanted to improve themselves and do well? Probably. Was it the buy-in for the S&C that got them promoted? No, obviously not. But yeah, I think it was that sort of attitude and being able to see the bigger picture like that as players definitely played a part in that successful group.
And obviously, with the majority of listeners being coaches, whether they are sports science or S&C coaches, what do you think are some key things or key traits of like a coach where, and I know yourself because you've got the interest in it, it might not necessarily be for you because you're going to adapt to any coach that's going to put anything in play. But for the players that aren't as bought into it, what do you think are some important traits for a coach to have to maybe get that buy-in and get those players on board?
Yeah, to be fair, from the podcast I've listened to that you've done with other coaches, I think they hit the nail on the head a lot of the time. And having a relationship with the player on any level is just so important, especially the younger players and the lads that probably aren't going to be as willing to do it. So getting those players on your side, if you like. I mean, not that you should have to, but obviously it's a big part of coaching and a big part of S&C that if you can build a rapport with those players, they are more likely to do the session for you rather than obviously for their own benefit. They'll say, I'll do this session because we've got a good relationship, sort of thing. I think that's really important. And also I think the ability to communicate why you're doing it and what it is you're doing and what is the end goal of this exercise, but with the least scientific way you can, I would say, and the easiest way to understand.
Yeah, 100%. And then the flip of that, have you? And you might have seen this without mentioning any names. Like in terms of coaches that have gone in and just not had any success, and players just haven't bought into the session, they've got nothing from it. What are some things that potentially they've done that you just feel like you maybe look and think, you shouldn't have done that because you're not going to get the lads on side?
I guess it's that like dictator style leadership where it's like, this is happening, I'm doing this, everyone's doing the same, you're going to do it in front of me, I'm going to watch every single rep. That never goes down well with footballers because I'm not sure if it's the culture or if it's people of this personality get drawn towards football, but they're always looking to take the piss somehow. So if you go in there with that attitude, it's a no-brainer that you're getting absolutely abused, because the players have the power at the end of the day. Like if they don't like an S&C coach, then it wouldn't take too much to get them out of the club, if you know what I mean. And the players probably know that as well.
Yeah.
So they will do the sessions, but you're going to have to push them and shove them to get them there.
And you made a great point before in terms of like, we don't win and lose games based on an S&C program, do we? Like that's what I think a lot of coaches have got to sort of understand, that we are there to support players, and the relationships we have and all the sort of soft skills that we spoke about loads on the podcast can essentially be more important. And I think we sometimes as coaches fall into the trap of thinking, oh, well, you've got to do this program because it will make you better on the pitch. But if you're not bought in and not believe in that, then it's not really going to be impactful, is it? It's not going to have that impact on a player.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, like, as an S&C coach, I think you're like a facilitator more than anything. Like, if a player really wants to buy into it, then you'll see real good improvements. But like you say, and we spoke about earlier, the contact time with players, especially the level I'm at now in League One, we play Saturday, Tuesday, and we have done all season. So in terms of like, you're talking micro dosing to the nth degree, like it's ridiculous, like trying to get stuff in. And some players will seek that out, and not many. But in terms of trying to get that exposure to a gym stimulus, like it's just so tough. And I mean, I'm sure every coach in an S&C guy that's listening to this is probably nodding their head and thinking, how do we get it in? But I think, like you say, if the culture could change, and even just one on the Thursday, just a general integration, or like a slow integration into like a little bit of power or a little bit of injury prevention gym, like managers would see that they're not going to get 10 hamstring tears every training session just because they've done a few Nordics and stuff.
Yeah, 100%. I was going to ask as well, so as your knowledge sort of builds and it has done throughout your career, what are some things that you've maybe implemented that you weren't doing before, or maybe shift your focus on to more, the more you sort of read and go into research and stuff? Is there anything that sort of jumps out for you?
I think because I've been in that sort of infancy stage of knowledge, and I'm learning stuff all the time, especially on Twitter, from just looking at people's profiles and stealing things. I'm sort of like, oh, I want to do that. And then, oh, I think that's going to work. Oh, I've always been like that. I've always wanted to try different things. But I think for me as a player, and I think it is very individual in terms of, obviously, like as a profile, as a player, strength versus power, etc. I've always enjoyed plyo stuff, and I've always felt that that's had a real good impact on the way I go into training, the way I feel in games and stuff like that. So I always feel sharp off plyos, and mostly bodyweight plyos, to be fair. Nothing too strenuous. But in terms of the way I play and the way I like to move and stuff, I've always found that plyometric stuff's been really probably top of the list for me.
Yeah. We've not mentioned yet that obviously you work as well with, I'm going to call him out here. I'm going to say a future guest of the podcast, because I've tried getting James on, he's not having it yet. So I'm going to say a future guest, and we'll get on to him to come on. Because anyone that's not following James Ralph on over on Instagram, he's doing some amazing work. And obviously you're working with him away from the club as well. Just firstly on that, what was the initial sort of reason for looking out for a coach like James to work with away from the club?
So at the time I was at QPR, and the squad was absolutely enormous, like huge. And we had one S&C guy, and he was very good, Dan Bernardin. I think he's still there. Great ideas, great implementation, really enjoyable sessions, but with 30 players, like, and it was just silly. And I'd seen James's Instagram, and I think he was just sort of coming into it and wanted to get into that sort of working with athletes. And it just struck a chord with me. I just really liked what he was doing. Like I said to you earlier about the plyos, he was doing loads of stuff and integrating plyos with change of direction and things like that. And I thought that brilliant. So I gave him a call and we set up a session. And then within sort of 2 or 3 sessions, I just felt really good. I felt light. I felt powerful, strong. And he's a great guy. He's great to speak to. His knowledge is top class. And I think that's a sort of testament to what he's done in the game now and what he's gone on to do and the players he's gone on to work with. And we've got a really good relationship. So we sort of just kept it going when we can, because like I said about the games and stuff, it is so tough to keep a program up like that with the load we've got going through us Monday to Friday, Saturday.
Yeah, and it's a great point, because I think a lot of people now look at players working with like private practitioners and they think, oh, well, why don't they value the S&C at the club? And it's not always the case, is it? You've just mentioned there that the S&C had so many players to work with that they can't go into as much detail as what you probably get from the likes of James away from the club. So that's a really important factor to take into place, isn't it? Whether it's a coach seeing a player of theirs working with someone, or whether it is someone that is reaching out to a practitioner as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm not sure. I've never had any sort of repercussions from it from football. There's been questions asked, of course there have, especially around injuries and stuff. They ask, what are you doing? What's this? And I think that's a medical department's nightmare, to learn that you've done 3 sets of trap bar deadlifts the day before you've pulled your calf. But like I was saying, it's not always related. And I think that's where S&C guys and the medical departments have such a tough job, because the manager wants to know why somebody's injured, and you've just found out that they've been doing whatever. But I'd also been doing that the 3 weeks before and hadn't pulled my calf, or the 6 months before. Like, it's not always easy to sort of attribute an injury to this specific thing. So yeah, I've not had too much kickback, but I know for a fact, especially at the elite level, I'd be very surprised if they were too happy about that, to be honest.
Yeah, but it's that thing again, isn't it? It's getting that quality, because what you're doing there in terms of this, and I've seen some of the sessions that James has posted of yourself and some of the work that you do, and it's stuff that you could still, like you said, potentially be doing at clubs. It's nothing that you're not going to have been doing. It's just not at the club, because then they can get a bit more attention on you, because on a one-on-one basis.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for somebody like me, for example, who has an anterior pelvic tilt, when I'm doing exercises, I need a coach to be looking at my anatomy, at my posture, and going, slight correction here, slight correction there, or your pelvis has dropped that side when you're doing that, and those little corrections. And you just can't do that with even 5 or 6 players doing the same exercise. You can't do that. And like we said at the initial conversation we had, I genuinely don't think this is down to the quality of the S&C or anything like that. I think it's down to the clubs, to be honest, because a lot, especially at the higher levels, they're dealing with silly amounts of money in terms of assets of a player, hundreds of millions, and they pay players X amount, and they'll have one S&C coach on maybe 40 grand a year. And you just think, like, that's just how is that? How does that work? For one player's wage a year at that level, you could get 4 or 5 S&C coaches, top S&C coaches.
Yeah.
And I think we see it from a medical perspective as well. They might have 1 or 2 physios. I mean, the top clubs are slightly different now, and I feel like they are valuing that medical side more. But if they can get a player back on the pitch 3 weeks quicker because there's an extra physio, an extra pair of hands there, then how much money have they saved in that respect? But like we keep going back to, it's just the culture of football, and just maybe not valuing things that can help.
Yeah, and again, we've spoke about this loads on the podcast, because it's obviously a topic that's really important for coaches when we've got so many people getting qualified and wanting to work in the game, but then there's only so many roles available. So it's good to hear your opinion on it, but at the same time, it is a little bit worrying, isn't it? And we spoke on message about learning from other sports as well, didn't we? And you look at some other sports around the world, and how much they value, or not even around the world, even in this country, the likes of rugby and other sports, like the amount they value that sort of S&C sports science program, that they have more people involved.
Yeah, 100%. And the problem with S&C is, like we alluded to earlier, it's just very hard to quantify the contribution that you're making. But for me, I mean, listen, I've never been massively blessed with technical ability, and the physical part of my game has always been what's got me to the level I've played at, and being able to sprint repeatedly, being fast, being strong. And there's just no way I would have been able to do that without good S&C coaching. Like, it's as simple as that. So you look at all these technical players and you think, realistically, like, they could be improved. They could get better physically, which is ultimately going to make them better players. So,
but do you see the attitude with that? And again, it's really hard because it's speaking in general terms again, but for those technical players, because I know exactly, everyone will know those sort of players, and if they're at clubs, they'll be able to pinpoint them as well. What do you think their attitude is? Do you think it's just shifting the focus onto doing the things they do well and just working on that, or and just putting S&C in the background? Or do you think it's like, we need more knowledge, we need to get more knowledge across into them on what S&C is and the sort of impact it can have? Because even if it's a case of just keeping them on the pitch, or where do you think we're sort of lacking, or what do we need to do more to try and get into those players?
Well, not being one of those technical wonder kids myself, it's hard for me to to answer that question. I think if I could answer that question and get it right, I reckon I'd be onto some serious money. But like, it's tough in football because there's so many different personalities. As the coaches will know, you're dealing with so many different backgrounds, so many different personalities and stuff. And yeah, I think engaging with the players for sure, and then some players will be interested in finding out why, but a lot of won't. I guess it's trying to find the sweet spot of getting something into them that, like you say, I can't remember which podcast it was. Somebody was talking about super strength.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was Mark Armitage.
I found that. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting and a really good way to think of it, because a lot of these players, like he alluded to, like, they've been built up their whole careers. They've been told they're great at this, they're great at this, they're great at that. So if you tell them you're really powerful, but your strength base is poor, they're probably going to go, well, I don't care, I'm a footballer.
Yeah.
Whereas if you, like you say, if you can, oh, you're so powerful, well, I think we could get you more powerful, like feed that ego, then yeah, you might get some more results from that, definitely.
Because how do players sort of, do you have conversations about the work that you do away from the club, and what are their sort of, if you do, what are their views on it?
Sorry, I think it just cut out a little bit there.
Did it cut out? Sorry, I just said, what if you have conversations with other players about the work you do away from the club? So when you're talking about plyos and your heavier lifts and the things that you do with James, what are players' views on that? Like, do they seem to understand the value and why you're doing it, or do they see it as a bit of like a gimmick? Or,
do you know what? It amazes me sometimes that I can talk to somebody or one of the players, and you'll think they must have some sort of knowledge of what you're talking about, and you realize that sort of blank look on their face, and you're thinking, like, are you genuinely like a plyo? They wouldn't even understand, like, or the difference between like base strength and power. Like, it's frightening how little they understand about their own bodies. And I think our body is what gets us paid, basically, in my view anyway. Whether that be technical ability, and like you say, just keeping yourself on the pitch and being able to do it repeatedly, like, surely that's enough of an incentive to buy into it. But to be able to make yourself 0.2 meters per second quicker, like these things are getting measured now, and it wouldn't surprise me if it's getting down to the stage where, like, almost like NFL combine things, how quick can you run, how many times can you do this, like that sort of, how high can you jump, how can you express that power sort of thing. And that's the difference at the top level. I mean, these top players, the top 5-10 players in the world, like Haaland, for example, I'm not sure if he buys into the S&C, but he's a genetic freak, if not. Right, I played against him, like, for international. Like, he's big, he's strong, he's fast, like, he's got everything. And like a lot of players aren't blessed with that. So if you can get close to that by buying into it and doing the work, then why wouldn't you? Is my view.
Yeah, and that whole knowledge thing, for you being involved in the game as much as you are, it's interesting to sort of get the perspective, isn't it? And I think coaches need to listen to that, because when you spoke about putting things across in the least scientific way before, this is the reason why. Because I think we speak sometimes as coaches thinking we're speaking to other coaches, and it needs to be put in a way, doesn't it, that players understand, that they understand exactly why they're doing it and the benefit it can have.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even like I know Nordics and sort of that eccentric strength of the hamstring has been massive in the last sort of 4 or 5 years. I've noticed it's really come in, and I would say that not a lot of players would know why they do a Nordic.
Yeah,
they don't understand that in their running gait, that at top speed, their hamstrings under like serious eccentric load. So like the only way to replicate that, or even get close to replicating that, is with the Nordic. Like a lot of players wouldn't understand why they were doing that. So it's just like 2 sets of 4 Nordics, like not realizing that might be the preventative thing that stops them picking up a hamstring strain like down the line. Because then I've never met a player that's happy to be injured. That's not a thing. So if they, like I said, if they can keep themselves fit and keep themselves on the pitch, and then not even to go into the performance improvements that they might get, that's the big thing.
And all of that as well comes into the intent you put into a session, then, doesn't it? Or an exercise. Because if you're not fully understanding it and you're going into a Nordic and you're thinking, I've just got to go do 2 sets of 4, and you see it all the time, don't you, in gyms, and not even just in football, but in gyms in general, people just sort of going through the motions, not really getting why they're doing it. And then without blowing smoke up him, like you look at the work that James does and other practitioners as well, and the players that are going through certain drills, or they're doing like a plyo when they're putting everything into it, or a big heavy lift, there's an intent there. And I think that intent has to come with some sort of knowledge on why you're doing it as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like, funny enough, in this degree, I've just done psychology, and like the idea of social loafing. Like in a group,
You like
can get away
psychology
with
as
doing
well,
less.
didn't you?
No, I did not enjoy it one bit. That's about the only thing I remember. But that idea of in a group, you can sort of, if you look over and he's not looking at you, and you go, yeah, 5 done.
Yeah.
Like you've done 2.
Yeah.
Or a Nordic, like you say. Like I've played with some big, strong, powerful players, and you're thinking they're getting like 300-400 on a Nordic, and you're going, I'm pretty sure you could get more than that if you stuck a bit of effort in. Like,
Yeah.
and like you say, without the intent, it's just, you might as well not do the session at all. Like if you're gonna do it half cocked sort of thing.
Because we spoke before as well, didn't we, about the sort of the culture again, and that certain coaches not really buying into it, and we didn't do it in my day sort of approach. But you made the great point in that it's a completely different game now, isn't it? And I'm sure you'll be able to speak about that as better than anyone in terms of the intensity and the sort of demands it puts on you now.
Yeah, I mean, I know that 25 years ago they probably weren't using the GPS data, or they definitely weren't in terms of metrics and stuff. But the game's only going one way, and that is more intense, bigger distances, more contact, and things like that. And players are getting bigger, players are getting stronger, players are getting quicker. So I think we'd be crazy to think if S&C was not going to play a big part in the future. And you just really hope that football buys into it sooner rather than later, because you look at other sports, and I know we talk about the American models and stuff, and baseball's different, of course it is, and American football even to an extent, because I mean intensity is just not there, is it? Not just big breaks and stuff. But the one that I've been looking into recently is like the AFL in Australia. And I mean the work coming out of Australia, I mean, I listened to so many things, and I know calf isometrics. I think it was Alex Natera. Loads of really good stuff coming out of there that sort of blow my mind a little bit, the way he talks and stuff. And I would assume, I mean, I don't know the game, but it looks a lot more similar to football than most of those other American ones. And like, they're all absolute monsters. And like, surely you'd be able to see the benefit from things like that. Like I put out on Twitter the other day, the question about potentiation and things like that. But will players ever be trapped by deadlifting and doing plyos the day before or even the day of a game? I just can't see it in my career, to be honest.
Yeah, because it comes down to that understanding, doesn't it? Because I think if you were to try and put that into a player's program that didn't have the knowledge and just didn't really get why you were trying to do something like that, that would seem probably just so far out of the comfort zone that they're just not going to do it, are they? They're not going to buy into that fact. But like you say, with that knowledge, and the other thing is with, I suppose, the potentiation is the at clubs. I think am I right in saying that a lot of clubs will do something, whether it's some speed work, not necessarily heavy lifting all the time, but there'll be other ways of potentiating before a game. So it's just understanding like what we mean by it, and also how we're going to approach it, maybe on an individual basis, like you're saying, because you're obviously used to lifting heavy and doing all the sort of high intensity plyometric work that you do, but not every player is like that. So we can take we can take it on an individual basis when you're working on an individual basis, but when you've got a lot of players involved in it, it's then trying to think about how can we potentiate everyone for the game, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I hadn't considered it from that perspective, to be honest. But like you say, it just comes back to the same thing, doesn't it? Like the contact time and the quality of the contact time as well.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say something else on that. I completely forgot what I was going to say. It'll come back to me in a second. But we'll go on to what's the sort of targets going forward? Because obviously going through, there's a long time left in your playing career yet. I'm not saying that there isn't, but you've got a good few years, good few goals to score yet. But after that, what's your sort of ideas going forward?
I'm hoping and praying that football takes on S&C a hell of a lot more, and I can jump in and get to a club in that respect. But I think in terms of education, I want to get this degree done, and then I'm looking probably at a master's in strength and conditioning, to be honest, which hopefully I'll be able to finish, like you say, before the end of my career, and then just wherever it takes me, to be honest. I mean, as much as it's great being a footballer, like we said earlier, the move-in and the job security is obviously so low. And obviously you don't have the benefit of just being the player who's getting looked after and pampered, and you're now working an extra hours before and after, and you just don't have any of that security. So I'm not too sure. I toy with so many different ideas, and like we spoke about James and the work he's doing. Could I see myself doing something like that? Definitely. But I do want to help athletes as much as possible, whether that be in football or even track athletes. I love how involved the S&C is in that, or don't tell my missus, but maybe something America wise as well.
Oh, nice. Yeah, we'll keep that under wraps. I'll edit that bit out just in case. No, that's class. I think it's just really interesting, isn't it? And was there any temptation of going onto the technical side, or was it always like S&C sports science where your focus led? Because obviously a lot of players will go into coaching, or they'll have ambitions of going into coaching. Was that anything that sort of was an interest of yours, or not really?
No, it's never something that I've been particularly interested in, to be honest. I mean, I like training, I like the intensity of training, but I still love football. I love watching football. I love analysing it tactically and stuff. But yeah, it's just not something that's ever really. I think the S&C side of it is probably more of a passion for me rather than sort of coaching would be. So
yeah, brilliant. And then on reflection as well, I wanted to ask, like, through your career, so if we could go back to like even getting into full-time football really early on, knowing what you know now in terms of sports science S&C, would there be anything that you'd go back and sort of change and maybe add to your preparation?
Yeah, I had a really good chat with the S&C guy at Charlton, actually, Tomo. He's been brilliant. And he always says to me in the mornings, it feels like he's on a podcast because I just pepper him with questions. But yeah, he's been great and he's been really good to work with, and I've really enjoyed that. And we were saying the other day that all I used to do, well, before I started playing really, but as I got into full-time football, was like absolute bro splits of bicep curls, bench press, triceps, and pull-ups and stuff. And I ended up paying for it because I tore my hammy. Like posteriorly, I'm still playing catch up. I've always been very quad dominant, and everything behind me is what does all the work for me sprinting. So yeah, I'm still catching up now. So like you say, if I could go back 10 years, I'd be thinking, please do some RDLs or please do something glute wise. I've still got no glutes now. I'm 28.
If you can't sit in the mirror, it doesn't count though, does it?
No, exactly. Yeah, that is the exact. No wonder I've got an anterior pelvic tilt. Jesus.
Now, at the end of a lot of the podcasts now, we do some like quick fire questions. And I'll just amend them a little bit because obviously a lot of it's based on people that are working in sports science and S&C. But I wanted to ask, like, you're doing a lot of reading, a lot of researching now at the moment. Who've been some like big influences, or where do you focus your sort of research? Is there any sort of names that stand out? I know you mentioned Alex Natera before. Is there anyone else where you've been sort of focusing on their work recently?
So yeah, we got the physio at Charlton, Danny Murphy, absolutely brilliant. He's been great to pick his brains on. He's the under 21s physio as well, and just coming at S&C from a medical point of view has been slightly different as well. It's interesting to hear him talk, and then like I said, Tomo's been absolutely great as well. Sam's top quality S&C coach at Charlton. Mike Boyle's been a good one. I've listened to a few podcasts, and to be fair, most of the guys that I've been listening to on your podcast, I mean, the thing I loved about the community that I found so far, just from being back on Twitter so briefly, is how open it is. There's no secret potion to getting a player quicker and stronger, and everyone's quite open to sharing ideas. So that's been really refreshing, to be honest, because you don't often see that, and especially in football. I mean, you wouldn't see coaches on there sharing set piece routines and things like that. It just wouldn't happen. So it's a testament to the community, to be fair. And I think that's probably why S&C in general as a profession has seen such great improvements, because that diverse thinking and being able to go to and fro with somebody on Twitter is that's invaluable, I think.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. And we need more of those sort of positive conversations, because on the flip of that, without making it negative, you do see a bit of sort of infighting and calling out and all that sort of stuff. And I do think it's hard, isn't it, on social media platforms, because you've not got many characters. You can come across different to how you want to come across in text. But I think you're 100% right. I think there's some amazing conversations that happen, and really important conversations that happen as well. And even yourself putting it out the other day about the potentiation stuff, you had a number of people jumping straight on it, didn't you, giving you their viewpoints and opinions. So I think it's really important that happens even more.
Yeah, no, definitely. The more things that come into my head are questions, I'll be chucking them straight on Twitter to get answered by the experts. Because like you say, it's just interesting to hear different people's perspectives and what's worked for them and what's worked for players and what hasn't worked and things like that.
And then one of the other things we ask at the end as well is in terms of like CPD, like continual professional development. So that might be like courses and things like that. But I know you mentioned, I think before we started recording, that you've listened to a few different podcasts and stuff as well. So what were some of the ones that sort of jump out for you that you took the most from recently? Because it'd be good to sort of direct some of the listeners onto some of the ones that you've taken the most from.
Yeah, it was the Science for Sport or Sport for Science one with Mike Boyle. That was really interesting. He had some serious views on bilateral training, which was interesting. Science for Sport, that one is. A lot of the high performance ones as well, not necessarily from an S&C point of view, but from a mindset point of view and things like that. They've been really good. Really good to tap into like the elite performers mentality and things like that. And there's one thing that I have seen, obviously, we've been able to play the international football and been being able to play with players that have gone on to do really well is just the intensity and the application and the consistency of everything they do. Like you say, the buy into the S&C, the buy into general training, the buy into nutrition, like that's been the difference from what I've seen. And obviously a serious amount of technical ability as well. But
yeah. Well, you're right. Like I've talked about high performance and I've had Damien Hughes on the podcast a couple of times as well. But that podcast, if people haven't listened to it, I'd 100% tell people to go and listen to it, because I like as well that they don't just speak to sportsmen and women. They're getting guys and girls from the business world and different sorts of high performers. So, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of them carry similar sort of traits, even from all different types of industries and stuff. So yeah, definitely point people in the direction of that. I think it's quality. The other thing I was going to say, because we might have a few players that are listening as well or watching, in terms of, because we always ask at the end, and I've covered this a little bit in a previous question about what you'd look for in an S&C, or what an S&C coach, how they should act to get the most from their players. I feel like we sort of covered that. But in terms of a player point of view, I always ask coaches, like, when you're working with a player and you have the biggest impact with the player, what are some like common traits you see with those players? So I don't know if you feel like there's anything that jumps out for you on the players. Like, I think you've sort of just mentioned it there on the high performance stuff, but is there anything that you feel that is common amongst the players that go on and do really well?
Yeah, I'd say like a natural curiosity as to why they're doing it and what they're doing. And because they'll be asking the same questions about training as well. They'll be saying to the coach, or they'll be thinking, why is it we're doing that? Oh, it's because we want to attack this area of the pitch with this amount of players. So yeah, like I was saying about the high performance, the consistency is so key, because the amount of players, I'm sure the S&C coaches get this a lot, is maybe 4-5 weeks before summer or at the start of the season, they'll have 5-6 lads. Yeah, we're into it. Let's do it. Come on, let's do it. And then 2 weeks in, 2 sessions in, suddenly they're sloping off and you can't find them in the journey. So like, it's something that I've even sort of wrestled with myself. Like the initial motivation I find is easy for me, and I know a lot of people don't and find it that way. But then it's the discipline of being able to do that every single day. I find it with like mobility routines, especially for me. I need mobility routines, and I always start off great, and I'm 3 or 4 days in, and then it gets to the evening on the 4th day, and I'm like, oh, the idea of doing 10 cat cows right now, like, yeah, it's a struggle. But yeah, being consistent, that natural curiosity of why we're doing what we're doing, and obviously the actual wanting to get better as well. I mean, a lot of players will get to a certain level, or they'll feel comfortable because they're playing in the team, for example, and that'll be them. They're more than happy just to coast through a season doing as well as they think they can without wanting to improve any further.
Yeah, it's a great point. And again, they're common ones that have come up when we've asked coaches as well. So it's really good to hear that you said something similar there. Mate, this has been top. Really, really good. Really fascinating to get your points of view on things. And it's just interesting that we have crossed over with a lot of stuff that we've spoken about before. If people want to go and give you a follow, because I know you've tweeted a lot about sort of sports science and S&C stuff. So it'd be great for more coaches to go and follow you, because obviously they can then reach out and get involved in some of these conversations. Is it Washington Conor on Twitter? Is that right?
Yeah, have a little look. Yeah, I think so. I'm usually tweeting something pretty boring, to be fair. At Washington Conor it is, yeah.
Perfect. So if they go and give you a follow, and then obviously it would be great to get any sort of conversations and discussions going. But yeah, a massive thank you for coming on, mate. I appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed it. And best of luck when you get back to games for the rest of the season.
Thank you very much. Thanks again for having me. It's been absolutely brilliant. I've really enjoyed all the podcasts that I've listened to so far. I'm just sort of working my way through them again now. After coming on Twitter, I didn't even realise this podcast was about until about 2 weeks ago, and I'm about 10 deep so far. So it's really interesting to hear the coach's perspective, because Like obviously they have so much contact with so many different players that it must be tough. And I certainly don't envy a lot of them that I've met. To be fair, with some of the players I've played with.
We'll leave that one there. No, big thanks, mate, and we'll stay in touch.
Top man. Thanks, Ben.
Cheers, Conor.